In today's episode, I speak to Irvine Nugent about emotional intelligence and leadership from the inside out. I talk about how you are a maverick leader everywhere and not just when you're at work. During this interesting leadership conversation, we discuss how emotional intelligence is at the core of business and how trust is back in vogue. There is no such thing as soft skills, as they are hard to do and are essential components of working life. Irvine also shared leadership lessons from the pub with the audience. This is a fascinating discussion on leadership and the human impact. Listen up. Before we begin our conversation, here is a quick shout out to the pathologically curious. Check out the Maverick Paradox magazine. It's a digital magazine written by Mavericks for business owners and professionals. You can find the magazine at themaverickparadox.com. The magazine's aim is to provoke maverick leadership everywhere. Welcome to the Maverick Paradox podcast, where we explore what it is to be a maverick and discover effective modes of leadership. I am Judith Germain, and my mission is to propel the maverick mindset into a world where character and integrity will ultimately have a higher premium than personality and bureaucracy. So thank you for joining me on this journey. If you would like to continue with me, then please subscribe to my podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, or one of the other popular podcast platforms. And today our guest is Irvine Nugent. Hi, Irvine.
Hi there. How are you? Thanks for the invitation.
You're welcome. Welcome. Yeah, I'm good. You?
I'm very good, thanks. Yes, summer is upon us, so I'm enjoying some nice weather.
Oh, wow. Every day here in the UK, it's sunny, windy and raining in different parts of the day at the moment.
Oh, yeah, I've memories of that, so I have from childhood.
Yeah, so it's kind of an interesting day, or a week in fact. But anyway, tell us who you are.
So I'm Irvine Nugent, and I have spent my career being fascinated and focusing on our emotional life and our emotions. I grew up in Northern Ireland at a time when the Troubles were at their height, and my generation is called Children of the Troubles. And so with that background, it placed a question in my heart. Why is it that society crumbles, and why can we not communicate with each other? And I think there's a thread throughout my life, which has always tried to bring people together to build bridges and not walls.
Yeah, that's interesting. And that is something that really needs to happen now more than ever, actually. Yeah. And it does feel as if emotional intelligence is at a premium.
Yes, it truly is, because, as we've begun to understand our emotional life more, it is the core of connection. And really, if we want stable relationships, happy relationships, peaceful relationships, at its core is high emotional intelligence.
Right. I know we know what emotional intelligence is, but do you want to explain it for the listeners in case they don't know?
Yeah, I think, the way I like to explain it is by saying when you have high emotional intelligence, you do four things very well. First of all, you have high self-awareness. You know what's happening in your body. You know what emotions you're feeling when they happen. You know your triggers. The second is that you've got a set of tools that are able to manage those emotions. So sometimes those emotions can get in the way of good communication. And so we have some tools to help us manage that. Third thing is we're able to read other people and what emotions they're feeling. We're able to feel the pulse of a room or a person, and we're able to show empathy to them and connect. And then the fourth is to be able to manage the relationships and the ups and downs with conflict and with all the different dynamics so that we can achieve the outcome that we desire in any relationship or group.
I love the way you explain that, actually. It's really simple.
Yeah, and it is, it's a very practical. Emotional intelligence, is not its definition. It's a catch-all for a lot of things. And really, I think the measure of good emotional intelligence is really when the rubber meets the road and we're able to display that in a skill set that we show.
What do you think about the impact of social intelligence?
Say that again. I didn't get the last two words.
Sorry, social intelligence.
Yes, very important as well, because really sometimes they're separated and then sometimes they're put together. But I mean, but my definition of emotional intelligence would absolutely as well enroll aspects of social intelligence as well, because really it is about emotional intelligence is really about the interaction with other people and taking that to establish social relationships.
Yeah, I think that's interesting the way you said that, because I see a lot of the time people having a very sort of purist definition of emotional intelligence, which I guess is, generally speaking, I can name my emotions, I can manage my emotions, I can read other people's emotions, and social intelligence being I'm aware of the impact I have on others, I'm aware of the impact others have on each other, and and you really do need both.
Oh, totally. And I would just argue that first definition, which actually you're very correct in, is too narrow. And, I think emotional intelligence itself is a catch-all concept. It as a concept, it was never supposed to be this narrow concept. So there is flexibility in there. And I think if there's no awareness of the other, then that's a failing in your emotional intelligence.
Yeah. And I think that's probably why sometimes you see people who have been said to have high emotional intelligence, but they don't seem to understand the impact they have on others. And I think maybe because in the beginning with Daniel Goleman and that, I think it was very much like what your brain is doing in that moment.
Yes.
And then as social psychologists got involved, it became more of an expansion into the social intelligence side of things.
Yeah, I agree. And the other thing as well is just there's so often an assumption made that because you're high in one area of emotional intelligence, you're high in others, and that doesn't always follow. You can be very self-aware, but not be able to read other people, or read other people but not be aware of your impact in them as well. So it requires work in all those areas.
And I like the idea about leadership from the inside out, because I definitely believe that, and I think it's something that has been missed for centuries. I think that's really, it's always been, for me, I always see that leadership seems to have become defined as something that you need to do to get somebody to do something, with no reference to you. The individual needs to be of something.
Yes. Yeah, no, I agree. There's a term that I use that I call, and I always say leadership starts with leading self.
Yeah.
And if you can't lead yourself, you can't lead others.
Yeah.
And so that journey just begins within. And it's just critically important. And, that one of the images I use for the importance of emotional intelligence, self-awareness then is, it's kind of like a computer. You can buy all this great software for a computer, but if the hardware is not good, it's not going to run properly. And you can add all this training to leadership and to leaders, but if this internal work is not done, they're not going to use it properly. They're not going to use it to its full capability. I
totally agree. I mean, my area of expertise is Maverick Leadership, which is something that I define. One way of looking at Maverick Leadership is to say, when it comes to leadership, a lot of people go to work, put on their leadership cloak, and then they become this leader. Whereas I think that Maverick Leadership is like the underwear you put on when you got up. It's just that integral. It's just like, I'm not leaving without my underwear on. I have a Maverick leader everywhere, not just when I get to work.
Absolutely. And I love that as well, because it is this, I'm a different person when I go here, or a different person I go there. And really, the skill sets that require great leadership are something that you take everywhere. It's a base.
Yeah. And I think that's the difference, isn't it? I'm also finding many years ago, God, I feel like I'm old when I think about it. Many years ago, way back. I mean, when like in the very early 2000s, I remember doing leadership, and I used to have a specific section on trusted leadership. Because one of the things that
was really needed. You know, how do you engender trust in others, and how do you actually display trust in others? And I remember back then, it was always a part of the course that people were surprised at. It seemed, you know, why would I need, because they got, as a manager, I need to trust Bob to do some work for me, but they couldn't understand why Bob needed to trust them.
Yeah. And
I still think that was, whilst I didn't necessarily separate that specifically out in training, I still could see that was an issue up until COVID, where people are actually saying, they've gone from saying people are our greatest assets to, oh man, people are our greatest assets, you know? And actually having to do something about it. So trust has come back in vogue again.
Oh, absolutely. Oh my God, trust is so foundational to everything. And, you know, one of the things that I always battle against is the language we use for some of these skill sets. And of course, you know, it's here in the, I'm sure it's the same in the UK, but we call them soft skills. And I hate that. I rebel against it because I say there is nothing harder than these skills because, you know, if you're interested in increasing your bottom line, this has a direct impact. And these are skills that just are not soft or can be left to the side and kind of, we'll pick it up when we have time to do it. These are core issues and essential issues for the functioning of an organization.
Yeah. You know why I think that, this is me just having a little miniature rant. But a tiny rant, I've got to be very careful. But I'm just sort of thinking that perhaps they're called soft skills because in the past, corporately, training, you had your mandatory training, whether it was mandatory because it was legislative, you needed it for legal reasons, or, you know, it was a technical thing that you can't function without it. And then any other training outside this kind of mandatory training was a reward. You know, you've been a good employee, we can't give you a pay rise, we'll send you on a training course.
Yeah.
And I wonder whether because nobody says hard skills training, that just doesn't exist, but they do say soft skill training. So I wonder whether it was like a coded thing for you only need to go on this, because it either became you go on soft skills training because you're deficient and we're going to sack you unless you start communicating properly.
Yes.
Or let me reward you.
Yes.
Because you're such a good employee, let's send you on a course like that. So I wonder whether it's come from that, because as you say, getting people to trust you is not something that happens just because you've turned up with the leadership cloak on.
No, not at all. And I agree with you, you know, and I wonder at times as well if, you know, part of that is, well, you know, I think part of it as well, to be fair, is our understanding of the power of influence, where it comes from, you know, the research on emotions and all of the social psychology you mentioned earlier. All of that is now beginning very clearly to show how fundamental, if we want to lead, then we have to be able to engender, of course, influence, and influence comes from trust. And, you know, part of that is warmth. And part of it is this ability to have people feel that they can be vulnerable in front of you.
So why aren't people doing more of this emotional intelligence stuff? Why aren't more companies asking for it?
I actually, here in the US, I see a shift, and I do. And, you know, it's interesting. It'll be interesting to see what COVID as well brings out of this. But I think part of it is that I think we haven't done a great job in connecting emotional intelligence with the bottom line. And so, you know, many business decisions are based on sales and profit and a connection. And, you know, I think at times, you know, some of the literature out there just doesn't do a good job. They kind of say, well, it's important without really proving it. So I think part of that is the sales job hasn't been a good one. And then I think secondly, I think organizations as well, at times, you know, are able to get by without emotional intelligence. And it's when the crisis happens and, you know, something says, oh, we need help. And very often, you know, you get the call, well, the team is in crisis, or the team is broken down, or they can't get on with each other. We need help. And I think, that's kind of when, well, we need emotional intelligence. So it's kind of like you were saying, it's the punishment for the bad employee. It used to be like what coaching was like. We'll get you coaching, and it was seen as a punishment rather than as a development.
Or the penultimate thing before sacking.
Yes, absolutely. Rather than something, hey, this is actually, we're going to invest in you because we think you're amazing.
Yeah. So I don't know. I think maybe there's a recognition that we're not machines. I know it sounds a bit stupid, but because even I'm thinking of that, because this is like, again, showing you that I'm mega old. But you think about I'm thinking about it thinking, gosh, if you listen to this, that's like I'm really old, and I'm not. But I was a senior leader at the age of 24, so I've been doing it for a long time. But if you think about like knowledge workers, back in a definition like in the 90s compared to knowledge workers today, it's quite different, isn't it? So if you think about like now, you're dealing with all these, complexity and all this, multitask, all this sort of stuff that's going on compared to before. You're more required to be adaptive to change than you did before. And that requires emotional intelligence, because the people that you're dealing with, if you need to influence someone, you need to understand that person, and you can't understand that person without emotional intelligence.
Oh, I couldn't agree more. So kind of the today's business environment, is rapid change. There's a level of complexity. There's overwhelm with information in a way that we didn't have that before. There is greater diversity. There is dealing with different cultures. All of this requires a level of sophistication to manage that. And as you say, a higher level of emotional intelligence to navigate through that, so that we can influence others.
Yeah, curious. So I haven't read it yet, but I like the title of your book, Leadership Lessons from the Pub.
Yeah.
So tell us a bit about that.
So as I've done a lot of one-on-one executive coaching, and one of the themes that I heard a lot from leaders was, how do we get engagement? How do we get people to really find in the workplace a place where they can belong? And how do we change things? And it's always been curious about that. I grew up in a pub. I lived in it. I grew up above it. And I kind of began to think about that. And I said, here's an institution, hundreds of years old, which people call their local, where they voluntarily go. And inside of it, there are interesting dynamics that happen, that people don't feel they have to come and be perfect people in there, that you can go in with your warts, you can share your wound stories, you can laugh, and good pubs, are able to expand the circle and bring the stranger in. In Ireland, where I grew up, if you go into the pub by yourself, someone's going to plop down beside you and begin talking to you. And part of that's to bring you into the circle. And so I said, there is wisdom here, and there are lessons here that I think that could be drawn out and really be applied in the workplace.
Okay, so tell me what they are.
So I think first of all is that the pub, first of all, the manager, the leader, the barman, the barwoman, the owner, very much sets the tone. And in Ireland we have this term of the crack. That's how was the atmosphere? We'll say the crack was good. So there's something about the mood and the tone that is set. And I think that applies really to leadership as well. I think one of the things we understand, for the emotional contagion is that our emotions, how we show up, will impact those we interact with, will impact the mood and the tone of the place. So that's one. Secondly, I would talk about the community there. So there's something about the community in the pub that is formed that I suppose we would call has psychological safety, that people feel that they can go in and they can share part of their story. And again, it doesn't have to necessarily be, the perfect story, or it can be things that went wrong this week or whatever. And so, in the workplace, we know that at times, just from what we've talked about earlier, trust, The trust definition I like is vulnerability-based trust. Can I go in and say at the workplace, I got things wrong, or I'm not able to do this, I need help. It's not the deep, dark secrets, but it's these basic asks that at times can be so difficult in the workplace. And then one other thing I just point is story. The pub really thrives on story. And I think in the workplace, we forget the power of story, especially in leadership, that in many ways, stories can emotionally connect with people in a way that data or other things just cannot. And in many ways, we can encapsulate a vision or a lesson we want or a lesson about customer service just through a story. So that's the kind of three that I would point to.
Yeah, I love those. I think that's really good. I think that Maverick leaders are great storytellers.
Yeah.
And I think that's probably one of the reasons definitely one of the top reasons why they're seen as inspiring and aspirational.
Yep.
And exciting, because everything's a story and it's a fun story.
Yeah. And we know, boy, do we know now from scientific research why stories have power, because when you tell a story, the listeners, they're not just listening to a story, they're experiencing that story as if they're in it. So, good stories elicit emotion. And when we elicit emotion, we have connection and we have influence and power. So absolutely, I can totally see that.
So, Irvine, how do you create more human workplaces? Because I think especially now, this is something that's really key.
Yeah, I think, there's a couple of things that I would just say. One is that I think we have to, first of all, have a cloak of curiosity about it. So I think we have to, first of all, understand that the workplaces that we have at times are not adequate, or most of them are not adequate in connecting people and people feeling belonging. So it's the first thing to accept the fact that we have a problem. And very often I get a lot of resistance with that. So it's having the mindset of curiosity. I think then it's to be able to explore with employees, what is it that they are looking for, and how can they connect to a value set within them. Very often I think we go to work, we do it, we come home, and there's some dissatisfaction. And I think when you explore with people what their values are and what they're looking for, I think they're able to connect with something larger than themselves. And I think, going back to the Maverick and the story, I think what stories do well is they're able to connect to something bigger. And I think people want to feel part of something bigger. So I think there's two elements there. One is the part of feeling bigger, but then the other thing is as well that within the workplace, there is connection, that there is human relationships that feed me, that there are human relationships that challenge me. And I think that has to be thought out as well.
Yeah. I think it's that turning the workplace into a place where everybody's winning. And it, for some, I suppose it might sound a bit non-Mavericky to say that, and a bit woo. But I think look, every workplace or almost every job has something in it that is boring.
Absolutely. Yep.
Especially not just when you're just starting out, but everyone's got this routine part of their job that they feel that they just can't handle it. Because especially someone that's a Maverick is like, oh, seriously? Not this thing again. But there is still fun to be had in that bit, and it's about contextualizing it. And I think sometimes, I come from a background of HR, head of HR for many years, and I think people kind of accept it and say, well, this is the job, and this bit is boring, and that's just the way it is, so live with it. When you go about actually looking at it and go, you know what, I could probably design this job better. Or have the right person who is good at doing that. Look at the whole department and say, okay, all these tasks need to take place, but I can design it in a way that the maximum amount of people are going to enjoy doing this thing.
Yes. And then just the other thing I would just add to that would be so often our workplaces are siloed so that we do work not realizing its connection with anything else. And I think when people see, yeah, this job is boring, but you know what? It's actually kind of important.
Yeah.
Because doing this job helps X, Y, and Z happen or provides information here or there. And when people see a connection, then the job becomes bigger than just, here I have to do this again. It's like, oh, now I'm helping, this person out or that person out. And I think very often, that's what siloing can do. It just creates, kind of a hole that we go in and we kind of wonder why, what am I doing this for?
It's back to the story. What is the big story here? I remember when I used to go into organisations when I was employed, and actually, because in HR, I'd have a meeting, I'd have separate one-to-ones with all the heads of, and I'd sit down and I'd be like, "Hi, this is me. Can you tell me what you do?" And they'd tell me what to do, and I'd work out and ask questions, so you do this, and how does that work with what the company wants to do, and who do you need to do your job for, and how does that work out, and how does what my department does help you or not help you? What are the things that annoy you about HR, and what are the things that, and all this sort of stuff. And some people would be like, "Oh, thank God there's somebody that, is interested in what we're doing," and others would be like, "I don't see, you're in HR, what difference does it make?" But it was a case of, I still do it because it was a case of having an appreciation for the work that's required in that department, which is kind of important because you might be recruiting for it at some point, because you know what it does. But also you need to know how everything fits so that when you're talking to people, you know what is supposed to happen and what's the point of certain things, and you can properly work out the advice that you give, or whether you need to change your own department to better serve the company. It's, and it's one of those things where in terms of leadership teams, they really need to understand what each person does. And I know that when I do training and I talk to leadership teams, quite often I'll say, to X person, do you know what impact you have on that person's department? And it's like, no. Okay. And then you go around and you answer and you'll say, why do you think I asked the question? And then they'll say something. It's like, well, you need to know the impact of what you're doing, and do you know what X is worried about right now? It's like, no. It's like, well, you're not a team yet, because a good management team knows, what's going on for everybody, not just for yourself.
Yeah, I mean, I couldn't agree more there. And I think, then you bring that on then to like issues, say, of accountability. So often accountability is about so I'm accountable just to the leader. And I always like, when I go into teams, no, you're accountable to each other.
Yeah.
And the while the leader may have the ultimate, authority in the end, it's the last resort. And ultimately, good functioning teams are able to have clarity about what they're doing, clarity about the impact of their role and other roles, and then just hold each other accountable in a good way, of just like, we're in this together, and your work impacts me and vice versa.
Yeah, I remember working in an organisation, and it was really, really, really busy organisation, and it came down to objective setting, and the director of that division didn't have time to read it. And I said to him, do you want me to write everyone's objectives for you? And he's like, would you? I was like, okay, but you need to check them off when I'm done. So I got his objectives, and I got sort of like the overall HR director's objectives, which funny enough, he was just like, here's mine, and she was like, why do you want it? It was really funny. She was like, why do you want it? I was like, well, I'm kind of writing everyone's objectives, kind of want to know what you find important. And it was so funny because she was like, I'm not telling you. And it's like, seriously? Okay, but this whole division is going to do stuff. Don't you want them to be doing what you want to do? And I literally went round and I wrote not everybody's, but the top team's objectives, and then checked with each person before I handed it to the director. And they were like, yeah, this is fine. And it was just because I knew exactly what they needed to do and what they was worrying about and what the concerns were and how the company works in so much detail that I was actually useful in the sense I could write objectives that they were going to get paid against accurately and without issues. And the only response was, I'm really glad you're writing them because these are really fair. But, and I think that's what every senior team member, every leader needs to be able to do with their colleagues. You need to know exactly what they're doing so well that if you were required to write the objectives, it would be fair and it would be right. Or am I just being really naive and stupid?
No, I mean, I think it is shocking. I think I've always found it shocking the amount of time that leadership teams have very little clarity about some decisions that have been made. And then that impacts buy-in because if there's no clarity around it, then why would I buy into this? Why am I going to do it? Why am I responsible for this? And I think sometimes we rush to decisions. And we could spend a little more time, and I know the pressure to get a decision done, but if you spend a little more time with some this clarity, buy-in, et cetera, I think at the end of then you're going to have much more accountability and you're going to have better results. Yeah.
What do you think about? Because sometimes I still get really surprised when you're working collaboratively with people and then they make decisions about somebody else that impact the other person. But they don't consider the emotional impact of that decision. Sometimes people can make decisions that literally takes money out of someone's pocket and they go, they'll get over it. And you're like,
And I think, what I've noticed in organization or just in general in leadership set, there are some leaders who put front and center human impact. And that's the first thing they think about. They think about what is the human impact here. And there are others who, and I would say it's not that they don't care about human impact, but I would just say that's not the top of their list. For them, it is, can I get the decision done? I need to get this done quickly. For some people, it is if making the wrong decision, I'll just make another decision that'll correct it. And then for people that really put humans, no, let's get this right first, because when you impact other human beings, the impact of that is long lasting. So I think, so I think it is a lack. It's a blind spot. It's just lack of awareness, and I think. Part of that is helping them perhaps see that impact and that has the potential not only just for the individual, but to spread around the organization.
Yeah, and I think, because I think you're right. I mean, none of us are perfect, and we all have blind spots in all sorts of strange places because there are blind spots, so that's not surprising. Yeah. But it's that, as you said, the human impact is probably more financially damaging than the impact in making a financial decision wrong, in a way.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. The long-term impact of that. How many times have I been coaching people and all of a sudden in the coaching relationship, what will come up will a decision that was made 7 years ago. And they're holding on to it, and it's there. And it's like, whoa, yeah, this is, and I think that goes to another point as well. And I don't know if you've noticed this, kind of when bad decisions are made, and bad decisions will be made. This is part of our.
We all make bad decisions.
but the inability to say, I'm sorry, the inability to say, you know what, I got that wrong. And the inability to say, I've learned from this and we'll do it a little bit differently. And that as well, could heal a lot of the hurt that's happened, but we never go down that route because we choose not to or wwhatever.
It takes courage, doesn't it? Have you seen or have you read the Stephen Covey's book, The Speed of Trust?
Yes.
Yeah, and it's that trust tax, isn't it? It's that it costs you when people don't trust you because they're constantly asking questions. Yeah. Why are we doing this? What do I'm not too sure about this. Whereas if they do trust you, then decision making is way faster.
Yes.
Because people will just go, okay, and they'll just go ahead and do whatever.
Yeah. Yeah. It's kind of like, that I trust the person's intent So when I know that a person's intent is good, I don't necessarily have to believe that everything they'll do will be perfect. But if I know it's coming from a genuine place that is to advance and to help, etc., then that becomes, that even changes how we receive decisions that are made.
Yeah, and it also stops you in your tracks, doesn't it? So, I've been in situations before when something's happened and I'm not happy about it, but I really trust the person who's made a decision. Mm-hmm. So I'm immediately going, am I perceiving this correctly? Mm-hmm. Because I don't think Bob would do this. So, is there some miscommunication? What's the intention? So you don't withdraw that trust, do you? You just kind of like, I need to go and speak to Bob. Yeah. The reason I'm saying Bob, I don't know any Bob. So and just sort of saying, well, what did you mean when you did this? Or kind of, and it turns out to be, yes, you were right to trust them because the good intent was there. But then if it's someone you don't know, or say it's a politician that you might not respect, you're like,
Yeah, it's the old saying, hey, it goes back, trust is earned. Trust is earned. And, and especially now in our societies, where, and some people bemoan this, but, our structure is becoming flatter. And, people had this expectation of, automatic respect and trust, et cetera. And well, that's not the way the society is changing now. And all of that has to be earned. And I think we need to know that we're living in a flatter society, and organizations, leadership has to be able to embrace that.
And I guess, as you said way back in the beginning, there is so much information out there, whether it's false information or correct information, it's becoming harder and harder to ascertain which is right. So then you end up having to rely on, is this a trusted source, whether it's an individual or whether it, and when the deep fake videos become really cheap, it'll probably come to the case of, can I literally touch the person who said this? Do I, because I can't trust, or do I know someone who knows that person who said that for me to be sure that this was actually being said? I think, we're living in interesting times for sure.
Oh, let me tell you, because then you used to be, kind of our thinking was very binary. It's either this or that. This is right, this is wrong. And now it's so much gray and so much levels of the levels of complexity added onto this is, and just information overload. And it is very interesting time. And I think we're only beginning to understand its impact.
I don't know what's happening. Are you in Ireland at the moment, or are you in the
No, I'm in the US. I'm based in Washington, D.C. Yeah.
Cool. Because I don't know what's happening over there, but I know in the UK, schools are now teaching primary age kids how to tell fake news. And I'm thinking, wow, this is like 8-year-olds, 9-year-olds, they're actually saying, so they've got because I've seen some of this stuff where they've got some information on the webpage and it looks okay. And then there are, 8-year-olds, 9-year-olds who look at the website, do some primary research and figure out if what they're saying is true and what are the key things that makes it look like it's not true. And this looks like it's something that must be designed to be used all over the world, because when you hit the web page, it links to other pages, so it's obviously being set up. But it's quite interesting at that early age, you're actually being taught to check what's real and what's not real.
Yeah. It strikes me that it's an advanced, it's a return to a thing as a human being. One of the things we ask when we meet another human being is, can I trust this person? Is this person a friend? Do they have good intent? So that's always been from evolutionary times, But now, of course, it's so much more complex because of the development of the web and the sophistication, et cetera. So, but it is that age-old question. And I think as human beings, we're going to have to evolve to really be able to assess, those age-old questions. Can I trust this person? Is this information correct?
Yeah. Or when to deviate. It's going to be, we're seeing the changes now, but the generation behind us and the one behind that is really going to live in the fruits of whatever it is that we've planted.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. And yet to be seen the impact.
I think that's a really good place to stop, unless you have something that you think, I really need to tell her this. Can't believe I haven't done it yet. So I'm going to tell her now.
Nothing is coming to mind.
Okay, cool. I have enjoyed this immensely.
Well, thank you. Me too. It was a wonderful, wonderful discussion. I really enjoyed it too.
Will you come back if I say, I want to talk about something else now?
Absolutely. Oh, of course.
Brilliant. Thank you.
My pleasure. Well, thank you too.
Thank you once again for tuning into the Maverick Paradox podcast. I hope you have enjoyed listening to my conversation with Irvine as much as I enjoyed having it. At the Maverick Paradox, we improve your impact and influence by enabling you to effectively strategize, innovate, and execute. So to find out more, contact us at judith@maverickparadox.com. Thank you.
If you are pathologically curious and would love to find out more about the Maverick Paradox, then please subscribe to this podcast on one of the popular podcast platforms. Alternatively, you could explore our resources on Mavericks at maverickparadox.com or read the Maverick Paradox magazine. We publish frequently each week. If you subscribe, you will get our monthly newsletter. And let's not forget my book, The Maverick Paradox, The Secret Power Behind Successful Leaders. For those that love a good discussion, you could apply to join our exclusive Facebook group. Finally, if you would like to work with us or are interested in the Maverick at work, check out maverickparadox.co.uk.